I never wanted you to see this letter while I was alive. That's why I hid it so carefully, folded between the yellowing pages of an old Bible, tucked away in a box of forgotten things. Maybe you wonder why, my dear child. The truth is, some stories are too heavy to tell face to face. They sit in the chest like stones, pressing on the heart until breathing itself feels like a burden. And sometimes words on paper can carry what trembling lips cannot. I remember the first time I thought of writing this letter. It was late, long after midnight, when the world outside was quiet and only the sound of the old clock ticked in the corner. My hand shook as I held the pen. These wrinkled hands that once held babies, cooked meals for a hungry family, scrubbed floors until they shone, and wiped away endless tears. They struggled to steady themselves. But I knew if I didn't write that night, I never would. I want you to understand something, my dear. Wrinkles are not just signs of age. Each line carved on my face, each fold on my hands tells a story. A story of laughter, yes, but more often of pain, of sacrifice, of holding everything together when it felt like the world was falling apart. When I was young, maybe not much older than you are now, I had dreams too. I dreamed of a house filled with flowers, a love that would last forever, and children running through fields without worry. But life has a way of changing dreams into duties. My love, your grandfather was kind but poor. We worked hard, harder than I can describe, and yet there were nights when we went to bed with empty stomachs. Still, we held on to hope. That hope was the only fire in the dark. I gave birth to children in rooms where the rain leaked through the roof, where the cries of a newborn mixed with the howl of storms outside. I learned to smile even when my heart was heavy, because a mother's smile is the rope that keeps a family from sinking. And when hunger clawed at us, I ate less so the little ones could eat more. Those sacrifices etched deeper lines on my face, but I never regretted them. There were moments of joy, of course. The first steps of my children, the laughter of neighbors who shared even when they had so little, the songs sung while working in fields. But every joy was shadowed by a fear I carried in silence. What if I couldn't keep everyone safe? What if one day all my efforts weren't enough? I know you've seen me sometimes staring out of the window in silence, lost in thought. Maybe you've wondered, what is Grandma remembering? The truth is, I often go back to those years when I was young, when choices were heavy but time was fleeting. And now, sitting here with you, I wonder, do young people today ever think about the sacrifices that came before them? Tell me, my dear viewers, if you were given the choice between following your dreams or giving them up to care for your family, what would you choose? Would you be strong enough to sacrifice everything for love, or would you walk away? When I was given that choice, I chose family. I let my dreams of traveling, of learning, of writing my own stories, slip quietly out of my hands. I don't say this with bitterness. No, my child, I say this with truth. Because that's what this letter is. Truth I couldn't say aloud. There was someone before your grandfather. A man who loved me dearly and promised me the world. He wanted me to leave everything behind, to run away with him to a place where the sun touched the ocean and worries seemed smaller. I almost did. I almost gave in to the temptation of freedom, of a life unchained by duty. But one night, as I watched my mother's tired body working by lamplight, I knew I couldn't go. She needed me. My family needed me. And so I let him go. I never told anyone, not even your grandfather. That was the first heartbreak that carved itself into my soul. After that, I learned to bury pain deep where no one could see it. I poured my love into the life I had chosen, into raising children, into holding my family together. But sometimes, late at night when everyone was asleep, I would pull out the little locket he gave me. A tiny silver thing with our initials hidden inside. And I would cry silently so no one would hear. This letter, it is not meant to make you pity me. No, child, it is to remind you that behind every wrinkle, every silence, every story untold, there is a universe of sacrifices and choices. I don't regret the life I lived, but I want you to know it was not easy, and it was not without its scars. As you read these words, I imagine you sitting with wide eyes, perhaps holding this letter with trembling hands, just as I held the pen that first night I began to write. And I want you to feel not sadness but strength. Because if I endured, if I held on through hunger, loss, heartbreak, and endless nights of fear, then so can you. Still, there are truths in this letter that will hurt. Things I could not say aloud, even when you begged me to tell you stories of my past. And those truths, my dear, will come in the pages that follow. You've read the beginning of my truth, my child, but the deeper parts of my story still remain hidden in the shadows. And if your hands are trembling while holding this letter, imagine how mine trembled when I wrote it. I knew every word I put down would reveal pieces of me I kept locked away for decades. But now that I'm gone, I want you to know not only the sacrifices I made, but the pain I carried silently for a lifetime. After I chose to stay with my family instead of leaving with the man I once loved, life moved forward, as life always does. The days blended into one another. Cooking, cleaning, caring for children, helping neighbors, working in the field, stitching torn clothes. On the surface it was simple, ordinary life. But inside me there was always a quiet ache. I never spoke of it because what good would it do? Regret doesn't feed a family. Longing doesn't pay for bread. And tears don't keep a roof over your head. Your grandfather came into my life like a steady river, strong, dependable, but not wild like the ocean I once dreamed of. He didn't bring grand promises, but he brought me loyalty. And loyalty, I learned, is sometimes more important than passion. He worked hard every single day with hands that bled and a back that bent, just to give us all a chance at survival. I respected him for that, even when my heart sometimes wandered back to the what-ifs of another life. But my dear, life was not kind to us. There were times when hunger was so cruel that I would boil water with a pinch of salt, just so the children would believe there was soup coming. There were winters when we had to huddle close together under one thin blanket, listening to the wind tear at the walls of our small house, praying the roof would hold. And yet, in those moments of darkness, I would find strength in the smallest things, like the sound of a baby's laugh, the smell of fresh bread shared by a neighbor, or the way sunlight found its way through cracks and broken shutters. I want you to understand something, my dear. Pain does not always show itself in tears or cries. Sometimes pain looks like a smile at the dinner table, even when the plate is almost empty. Sometimes it's the calmness in a mother's voice when she tells her children everything will be fine, though inside she's breaking. And sometimes it's the silence of a grandmother who hides her stories until the end of her days. There is one memory that never left me. The day I buried my first child. Yes, my dear, you did not know this because I never spoke of it. She was only 2 years old, small and fragile, with eyes that sparkled like the morning dew. Fever took her in the night, and by dawn she was gone. I held her tiny body in my arms, rocking her as if she might wake, begging God to give her back. But God was silent. We laid her to rest in a small grave, marked with nothing more than a wooden cross. That night, I thought my heart would stop beating from the weight of sorrow. But somehow I rose the next day. Because a mother must rise, even when her soul wants to sink. Tell me, my dear listeners, have you ever wondered how much pain one heart can hold before it shatters? Do you believe the heart truly heals? Or do you think it simply learns to carry the cracks forever? After that loss, I became harder, quieter. I still loved, I still smiled, but a part of me remained buried with her. And maybe that is why I clung so tightly to the children who followed, pouring every ounce of love into them, determined to protect them from the cruelty of the world. Your grandfather and I faced more trials, sickness, debts, betrayals by people we trusted. But no matter how many storms came, we endured. Endurance became our way of life. And yet, endurance always comes with a price. For me, the price was silence. I silenced my own dreams, my own grief, even my own joy at times, just so the family could move forward. Years passed and wrinkles deepened on my face, each one like a signature of survival. I would look in the mirror and barely recognize the girl who once dreamed of oceans and freedom. Instead, I saw a woman who had weathered too many storms, who had carried too many burdens. But I also saw strength, the kind of strength you don't find in books or in stories of heroes, but in the quiet endurance of everyday women like me. Sometimes when you visited me, you would ask simple questions. Grandma, why are your hands so rough? Or Grandma, why do you sit in silence so often? I would laugh softly, change the subject, or tell you a lighter story. But now with this letter, I want you to know the truth. These hands are rough because they built a life out of nothing. This silence is heavy because it is filled with unshed tears. Still, I do not regret. Because every sacrifice, every scar, every hidden pain, it was for love. Love of family, love of survival, love of something greater than myself. And if I had to do it all again, I would. Because what is a life without love, even if that love costs you everything? But my dear, There is one part of my story I never shared with anyone. Something I carried alone for many, many years. And it lies within this letter waiting for you to read. There is something I kept hidden deeper than all the other sorrows. Something I never dared whisper to another soul. Even your grandfather went to his grave never knowing. I told myself I carried the burden to protect the family, but in truth I carried it because I was afraid. Afraid that if the world knew, it would break apart the fragile peace I had built. When I was still a young mother, before the hardest years had hardened me completely, there was a day unlike any other. A letter came. Not just any letter. It was from the man I had once loved, the one I nearly left everything behind for. My hands trembled when I saw his name, a name I thought I would never see again. The paper smelled faintly of the sea, as if it had traveled with the salt air across oceans. He wrote that he had kept his promise, that he had built a life in a place where the waves kissed the shore each morning. He said he still thought of me every day, still wondered if I might come, even after all those years. I remember hiding that letter quickly, pressing it against my chest as though the heartbeat itself might give me away. I sat on the floor that night, reading and rereading those words until my tears blurred the ink. He spoke of freedom, of beauty, of how the world felt alive in ways we never knew in our small village. He wrote that he had never married, never settled because no one else could take my place. My heart burned with longing and guilt all at once. For days after, I could barely speak to your grandfather without feeling the weight of betrayal in my chest, though he did nothing to deserve it. I would lie awake in bed, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, and wonder if love and duty could ever truly live together. I never wrote back. I never allowed myself to answer. Instead, I folded that letter and tucked it away in the wooden box under my bed, alongside scraps of fabric, coins saved from small sewing jobs, and the silver locket he had once given me. But I read it again and again in secret, every time life felt too heavy. And each time I did, I felt the ache of two lives, the one I lived and the one I gave up. The years carried me farther and farther away from that secret, but the letter remained hidden. Sometimes I wondered if my children would find it when I was gone, and if they did, would they think less of me? Would they see me as unfaithful or weak? Or would they understand that the heart is not made of stone, that it can love deeply in more than one direction, even when duty ties it firmly to just one path? Tell me, my dear listeners, do you believe it's possible to love two people at once? Can love for one diminish the love for another? Or does it simply expand the heart in painful, complicated ways? That hidden letter was not the only secret I carried. As time went on, I learned that silence sometimes becomes its own prison. When your grandfather fell sick in his later years, and the money for medicine was never enough, I would sneak out to sew clothes for neighbors at night, my eyes straining by the dim glow of a candle. I told no one how exhausted I felt because what good would it do? People think grandmothers are made of endless strength, but the truth is, strength comes from breaking quietly in the shadows and rising again before anyone notices. I also carried guilt. Guilt for the child I lost, guilt for the dreams I buried, guilt for the times I snapped in anger when I should have been patient. Sometimes when my children looked at me with wide, trusting eyes, I wondered if I was truly enough for them. Did I give them the best of me, or only the broken parts one had left? These questions haunted me, questions I never dared ask out loud. But despite all the guilt, all the longing, all the hidden cracks, I found joy in the smallest things. The first time one of my children learned to read, the sound of music drifting from a neighbor's house, the sweet taste of fruit after a long season of hunger. Life was cruel, yes, but it was also beautiful in fleeting, fragile ways. There came a night many years later, when I opened that wooden box again. By then my hair was silver, my body bent with age, but inside me I was still that young woman, still aching for the life that could have been. I held the locket in one hand and the letter in the other, and I whispered his name into the night just once. Only once. Then I tucked them away again, as if they had never existed. But now, my dear, as you read these words, I want you to know that this letter you hold in your hands is not only my confession, it is also my gift. The gift of truth. Because truth, no matter how heavy, is lighter than silence. And yet, the heaviest truth is still to come. Something even the letter from that man could not compare to. Something that shaped the rest of my life, something I never allowed myself to say aloud. It is the final secret, the one I swore would die with me. But I cannot leave this world without giving you everything, even the parts of me I feared would destroy the memory of who I was. Read on, my child. The hardest part is next. My dear child, if you have come this far, your hands must already be heavy with the weight of all I have confessed. Yet the truth I am about to share is heavier still. It is the one I buried deepest, the one I feared would change the way the world saw me. But death leaves no room for masks. When the body is gone, only truth remains, and so I must leave you with mine. You know I raised a family, that I gave my life to your grandfather, to children, to the endless demands of survival. But what you don't know is that not all the children you called family were truly mine. One of them, your uncle, was born from a choice I made in weakness, from a night that belonged to a man who was not your grandfather. It was years after I received that letter from the man I once loved. By then I had grown used to silence, used to burying feelings under work and duty. But fate has a cruel way of testing the heart. He returned, if only for a short time. He came back to the village, older, lonelier, but still carrying the spark of the sea in his eyes. I told myself I was strong, that I would resist, but I was only human, my dear. For one fleeting night, I gave in to the longing I had hidden for years. One night that left me with a secret I carried for the rest of my life. When your uncle was born, no one asked questions. Your grandfather believed him to be his, and I let him believe it. I raised him as my own. I loved him with all the love a mother's heart can hold. And he grew just like the rest of my children, never knowing the truth. Do you see now why silence was my prison? How could I confess such a thing? How could I break the trust of a man who had sacrificed everything to keep us alive? How could I destroy the bond of siblings with a truth that would only bring pain? And so, I locked it away inside me, just like I locked away that old letter. Perhaps you will judge me. Perhaps as you read these words, you will feel anger or disappointment. So I understand. But I ask you also to see me not just as your grandmother, but as a woman. A woman who was flawed, who stumbled, who carried regrets she could never erase. Because, my dear, that is what it means to be human. We are not carved from stone. We bleed, we break, we yearn, and sometimes we make choices that leave scars not only on ourselves, but on the generations that follow. Tell me, my dear listeners, if someone you loved made a mistake that changed everything, would you hold it against them forever? Or would you try to see the whole story of their life, the pain, the sacrifice, the love before you judged them? Even now, I do not regret loving your grandfather. He was my anchor, the steady force that kept me from drifting away. But a part of me always belonged to the man I could never have. And though your uncle never knew, though no one ever guessed, he was the living reminder of the complexity of my heart. I carried that secret like a stone in my chest. Some nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if silence was betrayal or protection. I asked God for forgiveness countless times, and perhaps that is why I prayed so much in my old age, because guilt was my shadow, following me even in laughter, even in joy. And yet, when I look back now, I see not only sorrow but also strength. I raised children who grew into strong men and women. I built a home out of dust and scraps. I endured losses that would have broken others. I carried secrets that bent my spirit but never broke it. And I gave you, my grandchild, the love of every piece of me, broken and whole. This letter, then, is not just a confession. It is my legacy. I want you to understand that life is not a straight line. It is a weaving of choices, mistakes, sacrifices, and love. Do not think of me as perfect, for I was not. Think of me as human, flawed but full of love. If I could leave you with one lesson, it would be this. Never wait until it is too late to speak your truth. Silence may protect others, but it can also suffocate the soul. Speak while you can, forgive while you can, love while you can. Because when the grave closes over us, only regrets remain unspoken. I know these words may shock you, may even break your heart. But I trust that you, with your kind eyes and open spirit, will understand me. You will carry not only the shame of my mistakes but also the wisdom of my endurance. Do not let my secrets turn into your chains. Let them free you to live boldly, to choose love without fear, to forgive yourself when you stumble. When you look at my wrinkled hands in memory, remember not only the labor and sacrifice but also the hidden stories they held. When you see the lines on my face, remember they were carved by both laughter and tears. And when you think of me, do not think only of the grandmother who baked bread, who told you bedtime stories, who kissed your forehead at night. Think also of the woman behind her, the young girl who dreamed, the mother who sacrificed, the lover who erred, the human who endured. And so, my dear, I leave this last letter not to break you but to set you free. Carry my story with you not as a burden but as a reminder. We are all more than what the world sees. Live bravely, love deeply, forgive freely, and never ever be afraid to tell your story. With all the love that lived in me, Grandma.